Alright everybody, welcome back to the Dragon's Library, and today we are going to be discussing Godkiller, the book by Inara Crayer. I'm very excited to talk about this. I've been wanting to talk about it for a while, and things have just not gone as planned, so let's just dive right into it. For those of you who don't know, this is a book review, so if you're looking for movies and shows and games, I got plenty of other stuff to review. Check it out on my channel, but finish watching this first, because this one's actually pretty interesting. This is a fantasy book series by debuting author Inara Crayer. The general premise of the book is pretty simple. It's about a god slayer who has to work with some gods. So with that basic information, let's get into the summary. The main character, Kissin, kills gods after her family was murdered by fanatical worshippers of a fire god. Despite the ocean spirit that favored her father, she dedicated her life to hunting the gods who overstepped their bounds. Ever since gods and their worship were outlawed in Midrin, Kissin has followed this goal until she runs into a god she cannot kill, one bound not to a shrine but a person. Skedethin, I'm never going to say that again, a young god of white lies, is bound to a young noble girl who is soon on the run from a mysterious group willing to kill her and her family. The humans and young god set off for the destroyed city of Belenradin, the last stronghold of the old gods, in search of answers. On the way, they're joined by Elogast, a former knight in service to the king who seeks his own boon at his majesty's request. But what will they find in the ancient city where wild gods still roam? So yeah, that's the summary. Pretty cool premise with an interesting twist. You got the king plotting to get a favor from one of the gods and using his knight undercover to go get it. Meanwhile, you have a god killer being forced to work with a god of white lies because she's unwilling to kill the young child that god is attached to. I think it's a pretty interesting story, with nice intrigue, a cool setting, and some very interesting ramifications for the gods and mortals of its world. I really like the fantasy physics of it all. So with that out of the way, let's get started on the characters, because they're the basis for all stories. First up, we have Kissin, as I've said. She's what you could define as one of the main characters, probably the main character of this book in particular, as she's the one whose perspective we see in the prologue. She is a Vega, or Godkiller, orphaned before the Great War of the Gods, and her father was beloved by an ocean god, Poseidon. This resulted in her family being ritualistically sacrificed by the followers of a rival god of fire, Hest. Her father gave his life in exchange for his god saving Kissin, but when she fell into the ocean, Kissin rejected the aid of the god and washed ashore, leaving the boon unfulfilled. And as such, the god is constantly trying to get Kissin to let her save her life or deal with her problems so she can get the boon back. Because, again, her father was a very loved person by the ocean god, and that boon, on being unfulfilled, is considered a personal insult to Poseidon. And Kissin's like, screw you, you got my dad killed. Next up, we have Inara Crayer. She is a noble to the House of Crayer, one of the major noble houses of the Kingdom of Midrin. She has strange abilities to both see the worship of others, and a bond to the god of white lies, Skedethin, who I'm just going to call Skedi, because that's so much cuter. She has hid her bond with Skedi from her mother for a long time, ever since it manifested, and her mother in turn has hidden her daughter from the world to the point where many people in the town that her family rules over do not even know of her existence. She has an unknown father and is potentially maybe a demigod, though we're unsure on that. Heavy implication is that she's a demigod of a powerful old god, as this would explain the bond with Skedi and her ability to perceive human desire and emotions, but we haven't gotten that confirmed yet, so I'll just leave that as pointless theorizing. Next up, we have Skedi. He is a young god of white lies who manifested bound to Inara. He takes the form of a winged rabbit with deer antlers, and is less trusting than Inara, but cares for her deeply. Although he wants his own shrine to be worshipped as god, what he really wants in the end is actually just to be loved, to be wanted and needed, as gods are born of human desires. Human pleas for wishes and love. As a result, he wishes to be loved in turn. But his whole character arc is about realizing that Inara loves him, and that may very well be enough. That he might not need some massive shrine or, legions of followers. His main goals throughout the book are to be motivated to be free of the bond and establish a new shrine, while still allowing Inara to live her life because he cares for her deeply. Next up, we have Elo, or Elogast. He's a former knight of Midrin who fought against the old guys when Beladrin fell. He left the service of the king Arin, who he had served since a young age, when the king turned on all gods, including those who had aided them in the war. His first appearance gets across both his loyalty to the king and also his disappointment with the purge of the gods, as he sees worship as something to be a choice, not necessarily something that should be stripped away. Especially seeing as the god Hestra, goddess of the heart, saved Arjun's life by replacing his failing heart with a heart of fire. This makes Arin himself, for turning on the gods, somewhat hypocritical, and although Elogast cares deeply for him as an old friend and his former, prince and king, he can't agree with what he's done. Despite this, he agrees to go on a pilgrimage in violation of the king's own decrees in order to make a bargain with another god to replace a heart of fire, because the king asked him to. The king literally asked him to break the laws of their kingdom so the king can get a new heart and be a hypocrite. And he did it because he cares for him as a person and is willing to let this dispute lie if it means saving his life. So when we got the main characters out of the way, let's get into the positives. And there's a lot to be excited about in this book. First up, the world is very interesting. At first it seems to be a fairly standard fantasy world, but the actual mechanics behind gods and how they eventually become corrupt and the push and pull between humanity and their gods is a really cool foundation for a magic system. Most humans can't really do magic. There's actually no mages or anything in this world. There is a metal, a special type of metal that lets you kill gods. It's the only weapons that can hurt them and stuff like that. But there aren't any superpowered mages. The people who hunt gods are just really athletic super assassins, essentially, who go around with specialized god-killing metals. One of the opening chapters has Kissen fighting against a corrupt river god who went from small tidings, people just dropping small offerings into the river for, prayers of good harvests and stuff like that, and to make sure the rain keeps coming. And now he's holding the village hostage until he gets animalistic blood sacrifices. And Kissen makes it very clear that this is how gods start getting out of control. Gods start by asking for small favors, but the ones who grow out of control often begin asking for more and more elaborate favors for their ever-growing power. And eventually those favors become so much that they end up cannibalizing their own worshippers. They used another example with a goddess of beauty who used to offer makeovers in exchange for small offerings of candy. But as time went on, she grew more powerful and influential, and the town she lived in began to have an economic boon as a result of their entertainment district. More and more people needed her in order to keep their lives going, so she asked for more and more. Eventually, it got to the point where everyone in the city was starving themselves for weeks on end just for a single shot at a few days of beautiful, endless, enchanted beauty. And it really made the world feel real. The gods aren't just evil or cruel. They're almost childish in a lot of ways. They don't really understand the harm their actions can cause. Even Skedi, who's outright said to be one of the more benevolent ones, possibly due to his connection with Inara, can come across as very myopic and self-serving. He doesn't really understand the damage that even small white lies can do. And at one point, he even ends up hurting Inara, despite the reason what he did was fully motivated by a desire to protect her. And I think that makes the gods come across as more interesting than just these forces of nature. They're almost humanoids. They're reflections of human wants and desires. And they have their own wants and desires in turn. The main reason the Midrin is so out of balance is partially just due to the fact that the gods and humans could not come to an understanding, that the humans didn't fully understand the gods, and so brought new gods into worshipping places of old gods, which caused the war, and then the humans overreacted and slaughtered the gods in turn, instigating this bloody conflict. And you have a lot of people just kind of caught up in the middle of it who want no part of it. You just want to be free to live their lives, gods and mortals alike. And it's a really interesting setting. I want to make this very clear. It's a very cool, very interesting setting. The book itself is pretty short, pretty easy, nice read. I like that it shifts between the perspectives of our main four characters. You got Inara, Kissen, Ilogast, and Skedi. You get a good perspective from each of them. You understand why they're all on this journey, why they're going here. And they all feel like very real people who are just looking for ways to live their best lives and achieve their goals. In addition to that, I really liked the twist at the end, although I kind of called there was something iffy about, well, I'm not going to say it, but I kind of got bad vibes from the twist hints that we got. And I'm not going to say anything more about that because the big reveal at the end is kind of cool in a few ways. And really does bring into focus a lot of the hypocrisy on both sides. So, very interesting. Like it. In addition to that, I do like what they did with Kissin, because her whole thing is that she's trying to spite Odyssein by being a Godkiller and also by never using the boon for her father, so I really liked her ending. I'll talk about that more in the spoiler section, though. In addition to that, I'm also excited because this book is apparently going to be the first in a new trilogy by this debuting author. And after reading this book, I'm totally on board with it. However, it doesn't mean I don't have problems. And now we gotta get to the problems. First up, moving into the negatives. I said I really like the setting. And I do, but we don't get too much of it. Apparently there's some kind of maybe rebellion against the king, but we really don't get to see much of that because none of the characters are really directly involved in it, and we only get eyes on at the periphery. Maybe this will be fleshed out more in the first two books, but for now it felt very rug-pully, like the rebellion is just kind of there to get the plot moving a little faster, and to give us some drama on the route to the city. I also feel like a lot of the world is, well, the world of the story is fleshed out. I feel like Midrin itself is a less fleshed out as a city. So we only really get the city, town that Inara's mother rules over, and Baladrin. The other parts of this country are kind of just the road there. There's just like the journey. And I'm a little annoyed that we didn't go into like more towns or see more people. It's a fairly short book. It's not like super long, so it's not like Aragon will have like dozens of interesting towns or whatever. I get that, but at the same time, I would have liked it if the characters were forced to interact with more people. I get that the whole thing is that they're on a secret pilgrimage, so they can't interact because it's illegal to go on pilgrimages, and if anyone found out what they were doing, they would get, sentenced to death or exiled or whatever. So I get that you couldn't do that, but it is a bit of a shame. In addition to that, I don't think the king got entirely too fleshed out. I'm really trying not to spoil it here because they do something with the king. But I feel like his own motivations have not been as fleshed out as much. I hope we get more of this in the next book. But for now, all I can say is most of my negatives come from the fact that while I like a lot of things that were set up, I think that there's not enough for me to say that they're going to be done well because they weren't as fleshed out. There wasn't enough time spent on those details in this particular book. I want to rectify this by saying, if these things are fleshed out in the sequel, I feel like it's not as much of a problem. But as it stands now, I can't help but ignoring it feels a little incomplete, which is fine for serialized media, but it does leave the first entry sometimes feeling a little toothless unless you have the second book right now. Like if someone reads this 3 or 4 years from now when the entire trilogy's out, I feel like this is going to be much less of a problem. I want to emphasize that very highly. All in all, while the world has a lot of potential, it's not as detailed as it could be. But I like the systems they've set up, I like the base characters they've set up, and I think that this could be the start of a really cool, really interesting fantasy series. So I'm very interested to see where it goes. Moving on to the conclusion. Godkiller is an interesting world that focuses in on some of my favorite things I love when fantasy does. Interesting places with their own history and conflicts, fueled by characters who seem like they have life to them, who feel like more than just archetypes, and who genuinely seem to breathe life into everything they do. Characters who aren't defined by single ideals. Who can make mistakes, who can be awkward around each other, who can just be people. I like the system of gods and mortals and the favor and belief system that sustains. It makes it for realistic reasons why gods could turn evil, why the Vega were necessary even before Midrin's harsh laws became around. It also explains why people didn't really like the Vega back then, and why people are still worshipping gods, because sometimes there's a drought, sometimes you just have to worship to the river god, sorry. In the end, I think that this is a great book, that has a great potential, and quite frankly for a debuting author is a really strong showing. I cannot wait to see what else Hannah Crayer is going to release. 9 out of 10, you should really check this out. However, before you go get it, I do have to make one final qualification. As of the time of this recording, you can currently only order this book through amazon.co.uk. If you look for a normal Amazon, you will not be able to find or buy it. You do have to pay extra shipping fees, and you cannot buy the Audible version unless you live in a handful of select countries. If you live in the US, you can't get the Audible version. I tried really hard. You just can't. That's partially why this review is so late. This came out like last month, but I only got the book near the beginning of February, I think, or near the end of January because I had the delay, and then there was just a bunch of other stuff going on. So that's why this review is pretty late. Sorry about that. And I did want to make people aware of that because it can be a little hard to get the book. Okay? Okay. So with all that said and done, let's move on to the spoiler section. Oh boy, here we go again. So, warning, there are massive spoilers for this book. Like, I'm spoiling endings, I'm spoiling character reveals, I'm spoiling all sorts of stuff. So get out of the way if you're not on board. Okay? Everyone who doesn't want to listen to spoilers, go on? Alright. So, first up, let's start about Kissin, because I really liked her arc. Kissin has the whole, I'm gonna kill gods and I'm gonna die my death because I don't need no ocean god saving me. Fuck you for getting my parents killed. And I like that. She's really capable. She's probably the best fighter of the whole group, which is really impressive considering one of them is like the right-hand knight of the king, like his personal bodyguard slash war hero. Kissin also fought in the War of the Old Gods and was one of those who helped to kill the god of war, who was like one of the last major opponents in the war. And her arc is mostly about growing closer to Inara and learning to see Skedi as less of a problem and more as a being, an intelligent being in his own right. In the end, near the end of the fight, they have to fight this big fire god. They actually have to fight Haset, the fire god who ritually sacrificed her, parents. And Haset's like, do I know you? It's like, you fucking killed my parents. Like, you're gonna have to be more specific. My followers sacrificed so many people to me, I genuinely can't keep track. It was against Osidin. Oh, the ocean god favored. You know, she took your city back in the end. She just kept battering at the shore until it fell into the sea. Sore loser, that one. And she gives this thing 1-4. She rips to set a new one and buys Inara and Elogast enough time to escape. In the process, however, she is knocked into the river or in the ocean below the city, off the overhang, and falls down to the ocean. She's perfectly willing to let herself drown. Osidin's like, let me save you. Let me grant the boon at long last and finally reclaim the favor of my dearest one. And she's like, screw you, I fucking did my job, they're safe. And then Osidin kind of points out that they're not safe. The king is involved, long story, and will likely be helping to hunt them down. And, Elogast is currently cursed to attract horrible shadow monsters, so that's not going to work out. What are you going to do? Save them here only for them to die in a few nights when one of their inevitable foes catches up with them? And Kissin instantly has to choose between not her, strength, but her pride versus someone she's actually grown to care for. Because she's really grown to see Inara almost as like a daughter. She taught her how to fight, how to survive. And she's thinking about how her own father was willing to sacrifice himself to save her, and she suddenly realizes that she doesn't want to repeat that mistake. So she allows Osidin to save her, not so she can be saved, but so that Kissin can then go save Inara. Which makes a difference to her, because she didn't want her life to be saved just because her father was a martyr. There's a common refrain Kissin likes to say is that gods love their martyrs. And that's how she always saw it. Osidin could have saved her whole family. She could have saved both her and her father. But her father begged Osidin to save Kissin instead because he knew Osidin would not go that far even for one of her favorite. And that's one of the things Kissin has always had a problem with. Whereas Skedi has always been fairly kind and even open, despite being a god of white lies, in his love and caring for Inara, and even apologized when he went too far. She doesn't see Osidin as someone who would go that far. Osidin proved that she wouldn't go that far when she let Kissin's father die. but she's finally willing to give up the boon because she doesn't need it to spite her anymore. She only uses it because she wants to see Inara safe. And that's just a really touching part of her character arc. I liked it. I think it was great. I loved the relationship between her and Inara, and I just think it was all around pretty cool. Inara is also a great character. We're going to move on to her now. Her whole thing is that she was, a few months ago, Sketty just appeared, and Inara could suddenly see the prayers of other people being sent to the gods. Like, she can see it almost like, emotions people see colors when they see emotions, sort of like that. So whenever someone prays, she can, like, see the emotional energy of that prayer wafting off them to go find the god they're praying to. And apparently, according to Sketty, that's how gods see the world. Which, again, heavily implies that she's most likely a demigod. She's even called at one point, I didn't tell you guys this earlier because I didn't want to make it too much of a spoiler, but she's even called a halfling at one point by another old god there in the city. And it's heavily implied that so basically, gods have to either be bound to a shrine or bound to another god who's greater than them. And so it's heavily implied that the reason that he's bound to Inara is because she is the descendant or child of a very, very powerful old god. Like someone really high up on the totem pole. So her whole thing is that her mother was a noble, part of the noble family, who was in favor of the king. And according to Inara, that favor fell out over time. But everyone else seemed to believe that their family, the Crayer family, was still heavily aligned with the king. So a lot of things they said didn't really add up. This is where, like, the subtle rebellion thing comes into play. Because when Inara goes to find Kissin, the same day Inara goes to find Kissin to go ask this Vega who stumbled to their town how she could deal with Sketty, because she doesn't know what to do. They just want to be separated, because Sketty wants to go live his own life at this point, and Inara wants him to be happy and wants to be able to be safe, because gods are killed on sight, and they worry that if anyone found out, they'd kill her in order to kill Sketty. And so, while they're doing that, though, after Kissin agrees to give her some help and go talk with her mother, they turn to find the house being burned to the ground by assassins, who are later revealed to be working for Hasset and the king, who are now in cahoots, because the king wants to essentially ascend to pseudo-godhood and rule over his nation in a new age of the gods, because he's gone completely off his fucking rocker. We'll get to that with Thalogast, but yeah. So while they're on their journey, Inara and Sketty team up with Kissin. Sketty doesn't trust her because she's a Godkiller, obviously, and he's worried that Kissin doesn't have Inara's best interest in heart. They're going to Valadrin. God, I can't pronounce how to say my life. Blinrodin, to find a god who can take Sketty in, essentially give him a shrine or a place to stay, so that his bond with Inara can go, because when they try and leave each other, they get both weak and start dying, so it's worried that if you killed Sketty, you'd kill Inara. Along the way, they meet up with Thalogast, who is asked by his king, like I said, to go restart his heart by making another bargain with a fire god. And after he meets up with a guy who's gonna, bring him on the pilgrimage, he's sort of like a guy who does, like, the underground, pay me and I'll take you on the pilgrimage to the lost city of Blinrodin. But apparently, he's also part of the rebellion and knows the king's up to no shit, because it turns out the Crayer family has been working against the king with the rebellion. The king sent followers of Hasset to burn her house to the ground and was supposed to kill Inara as well, so good thing Kessin decided to keep her survival secret. Good on her. And Thalogast knows none of this because he left years ago and is being used because he was willing to give anything, even his life, for his king. You can see where this is going. Hasset's willing to give the king the power he needs to ascend to, like, semi-godhood if someone offers their life willingly in exchange, because that's what's needed for that kind of power. And Thalogast is just that earnest, and the king is playing him. So the rebellion figures out, hey, a knight of the king who probably doesn't know what the fuck he's been up to the last few years is going on a weird pseudo-secret pilgrimage. Yeah, we should probably curse him. So they used a god that they're in contact with to curse him. So these shadow monsters will appear. First night there's one of them, second night there's two of them, next night there's four of them. It's not every night, it's like every week. Once a week, shadow monsters will attack. And they end up getting separated from the rest of the pilgrimage after one of the members dies. And at first they think it's Kissin or Inara who's attracting them. But then they find the mark on Elagast and they realize, oh shit, the shady guy who was leading us on the pilgrimage and said, oh shit, I didn't think you'd be bringing a child with you, was actually planning on potentially having all the other pilgrimage members die just to stop this guy. Because it turns out, Haset's going to use Elagast's sacrifice to power the king's new heart. And obviously, after he realizes he just bargained his life away to make his king betray everything he's ever believed in, and potentially just become a monster, also Haset is also a monster, and really should not the kind of guy you should be bargaining with. So Elagast tries to fight back, Kissin makes her sacrifice, and then is saved by Odysseus and Inara. Inara and Skedi manage to escape with Elagast, and the two of them manage to purge him of his curse, finally preventing them from being killed by the Shadow Wolf things. Meanwhile, Kissin washes ashore, now free of her boon to Odysseus and determined to protect Inara, Skedi, and Elagast, in order to prevent the king and also save the young girl she now considers sort of like a daughter. And that's Godkiller. It's a pretty straightforward story, like I said. And I'm really hoping we get some more fleshed out on like the rebellion, the king's motivations, and stuff like that in later books. I really hope this gets a sequel, because despite it being very straightforward to the point, which some people might even call a benefit of the whole thing, like an upside, it is a very interesting tale that seems to have a lot to say about this world and these people. And quite frankly, I'm just interested in seeing where this goes. So yeah. With all that out of the way and the spoiler talk now done, let's go ahead and go to the conclusion! Yay! So, this is the end of the video, and I will be working on the review for Forspoken. This review will not be coming out this weekend. It will likely be coming out Monday because I'm still behind. I can never get things out when I want to. I'm sorry, I tried to, but I've just been so exhausted. I kind of just slept for most of Saturday and most of Sunday. I apologize, but I was really tired this past week. I've been working on a lot of other projects. But I'm free now. I'll be on call this coming week, so I'll probably have some more time at home to just work on this. I should have Forspoken out this week, and I will have more stuff coming down the pipeline. We'll have to see where we go from here. Most likely I'll be reviewing some of the new movies and shows that have come out lately. But for now, that is all. But hey, look at this. It's the subscribe orb. Look at its majesty. Click on it and subscribe. Go to my channel and subscribe. Up here, we've got a playlist of all the other stuff from this year. Check it out. We got a lot of new things to review. You want to see that Scooby-Doo review again? A lot of you really like that one. And then there's a video that YouTube says you'll like. Hope you enjoy it. See you next time. Bye.